Hi again, Marcy Davis here from Quick Start Piano, where adults learn by playing the music they love most. And today we're going to take a look at Clocks by Coldplay. And I'm going to provide you some tips to make it a little bit easier to learn. Because it is so chord-based, learning the chord patterns will make it easier. The music that I am looking at is a sheet music version that I downloaded from sheetmusicdigital.com, but the student that I was helping was using a collection of Coldplay in an easy piano version. And it's especially for this particular song, it's not as important that you have the exact same version because it is so chord-based, but it is important that we are in the same key. Hi again! Today we are working on the piece Clocks by Coldplay. And for those of you who have the sheet music, it looks like this. Available on sheetmusicdigital.com. So I'm going to go through a variety of things on this piece. All music is based on chords, but this piece in particular is really chord-based with lots of repetition of the patterns, which makes it a great tune to learn some of these patterns and the chords. So whether you're using the sheet music or not, you can follow along with what I've got here. So we've got the very first chord in Clocks is a G chord. And if you have only learned root position, that might not look like a G chord. But if I take this G and put it down there, now you can see the root position G that we've learned. So in this piece, they're putting the root on the top. We call that first inversion, but it makes a little bit more sense to just say root on top, because that's a little obvious there. And then it has a repeated pattern. So it starts at the top of the chord, works its way down, and then it ends at the top. If you have the more complicated version, I believe it ends in the middle. So you can choose which one you would like to do. So we've got our G chord, and you're working on the repetitions here. And then we have our rhythm. You've got eighth notes, and some of you have learned to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm going to suggest a different way on this piece. Because the groupings are more in 3, and then if you're adding that one, there's a 2, so you've got 3, another 3, and then 2, or a long 1, which you could still count as 2. So if you count the individual eighth notes, it will be easier because it matches the actual feel of the song. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And when you go to put the left hand together, it will make it a lot easier if you're counting that way too. Okay, so we have the G chord to start off with. The next chord we have is D minor. On this one, the root is in the middle. So you've learned the old D minor with the root on the bottom. This time we're going to aim for the middle D, and we still want to spell it the old way. So D, F, I'm out of fingers, so I'll go down here, A, D, F, A. And the nice thing is we keep the same pattern. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. We've got 2 measures of D minor, and then it switches to A minor. This one's nice because it is in root position. So we've got the A on the bottom there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Now you've just learned a huge part of the song because the piece just repeats this pattern over and over again in the right hand and sometimes in the left hand too. So you can play along with the play along track. And I think before I do that, let's talk a little bit about technique. So we haven't talked anything about how you might go about hitting these notes. In other lessons we've talked about how you want to use your whole arm weight, have your hand hanging down loose like this, and you've got a nice natural curve to your fingers. So I'm going to suggest when you first hit this first note here, we've practiced hitting single notes and then you bounce up, you kind of release like a shock absorber. But this pattern is connected in a group and a sequence, so we can't let go right here because we've got more that comes after it. So what you want to do is connect all of those in still nice big arm motion. So I'll put my hand here so you can kind of see three-dimensionally what's going on there. So I've got down, and then you still have a release at the end. So this would be a good thing to practice. You can even use it as a warm-up. You don't have to try to play the whole song, just think about your technique. So then we got the first page of the piece. So I'm going to call up clocks on here and play along with that first page. I can get my computer to cooperate. There we go. So we've gone over three basic things already. We have the chords, we're playing them in their version. We've got the rhythm, we're thinking 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And we have the technique. So that is three things that you're trying to juggle all at once. If that's too much, always separate them out and say, I'm just going to get the notes of the chord right. You can even block those like that and just play them all together, just get your fingers lined up. And then you can separate out and say, I'm just going to worry about getting the rhythm. You could tap the rhythm. You could play, if you have one chord down, you could play that single chord all the way through, getting the rhythm right without switching to the other chords. And then for the technique, you can just turn everything off and just take a couple of chords that you know really well and think about the technique. And then when you're playing the other times, if the technique is there, that's great, but you might not be ready to think about them all at the same time. So with that in mind, let's go to the second page. And if you scan the second page, you'll see that the right hand is the same. So we're just going to look at the left hand, and we have just single notes. So under a G chord we've got, and that is the root note of the G chord. Later on I'm going to show you how you could add extra notes to this pattern, so having your fingers there is not a bad idea, because then you'll be ready to play the rest of the G chord notes. For the next chord you've got D and then A. So all we're doing is we're playing the name of the chord. And as far as the rhythm goes, they've got a dotted quarter note and then an eighth note tied. And the traditional way of counting that, again, would be 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. But we're going to count it instead 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And you can see from the page how those line up. You're going to hit the left and the right at the same time as you're repeating that pattern. So we've got 1, 2, 3. We got one pattern. Now both hands start again. 1, 2, 3. And then the last pattern, the 1, 2, the left hand doesn't do anything. So together, together, right. And then it repeats. Together, together, right, together, together, right, together, together. And it repeats on from there. So that takes care of the first two pages and a little bit more. Some of you, if you're not trying to play the melody, instead of reading what's written on page 3, you could just keep going. Like that. So you're being the accompanist the whole time through. So that would get you ready to be singing the melody or listening to someone else play it or playing along with the play-along track. If you're trying to do exactly what's written, then you'll need to work your way through those notes. So I'm going to concentrate on the chord patterns. So some other techniques to make this sound a little bit more like the original. When you come to the G chord here, and you've got your right hand doing this, your left hand could imitate that, still staying in the root position. So you start with the G on the bottom. And we're going to go, instead of going down, we're going to go up, 2, 3, and then back to the bottom, up, 2, 3, 1, 2. we're doing kind of this opposite motion, and you can do the same thing with the D. The trick is you need to move your left pinky onto D position. So you've got D root here, and on this one you got D root in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then A is a little easier. Everybody's in root position. A, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then back to G. So what that might look like with the recording, let's see here. Oh, I'm going to hit the right button. Okay, there we go. I'm going to start off with just the right hand to build up to it a little bit. So that gives you an idea of what you could do. Now, if you are one of the people doing this, where you're trying to fill out that whole pattern, you could do the same on the left end. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then switch to the D. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Oops, sorry. Now, as far as where you're going to play the left hand, you just have to make some choices. Try not to get too low. That's not going to sound very good, but you also need to have room for your right hand. Also, as you go through the piece, it gets very repetitive, so you might want to sometimes move it up a little higher, and that could sound nice. Oh, I kind of like that. Especially because keeping in mind that the original was in a key that was a little bit higher than this. So we've lowered it. So raising it up a little could sound nice all the way through. So I'm not going to go through every reading notes section. If people want some more examples of what they could do throughout the piece, let me know. But it is so repetitive that you could use a lot of these ideas throughout the piece. And then if you're playing the melody, if you find that the melody is really easy, and that feels very easy to you, you might consider putting this on the bottom. But that is pretty advanced to do both of those patterns together. It's pretty tricky. So if you're struggling just to get the melody, then I would go with what they have written. Or if you don't want to read what they have written, if it says G chord, play some combination of either the root or the whole chord or the shell. And that will sound just fine. It'll sound great. So have fun working on this. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you at your next lesson. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss another tutorial or a piano book tour showing you what's inside. So have fun making music, and I will see you in the next video.